As I said, I'm very proud to be an alumni of this college. I've been working at St. John's since 1989. And, you know, Basilio asked me to do something. I'm like, sure, what do you need me to do? He said, give me a welcome. I said, okay, what are we going to talk about? Well, then he comes up with this, well, we're going to continue the future of education discussion that I believe I gave an introduction to that also when we had the faculty here. And, you know, what I'm thinking about the future of education, at least at the university level, and specifically for you guys who've just been through it at the graduate level, the changes that have happened since March of 2020 due to the pandemic. These are all changes that were coming slowly. Things like this, teaching a class over Zoom. Almost nobody did this. It was either, you either had a face-to-face class or you had an asynchronous online class. Well, now we realize that we can kind of do both. We can have an online class, but it can have lecture and discussion and a substantive interaction between the students. That was a change that was probably coming, but it was forced upon us. In undergraduate education, in the fall, quote, we're going to be back to normal, whatever the normal is with full classes at the university. Yet I know we're running far more online classes than we ever did. So although, quote, the pandemic may be over, the effects on education are going to be permanent, at least some of them. And what I think is a lot of the changes are going to be very much for the better. And, you know, you guys are at the back end of your college, of your university career, although I hope some of you consider going on for that doctorate degree if you have an interest in doing such a thing and become like many of us are. We're doctors, but not the kind that help people. That's how I usually describe the nature of a PhD or an education doctorate. So in a certain extent, you've missed these changes, but you know, you guys can always remember yourselves as the students that survived the pandemic and thrived in the pandemic. So I wish you all the very best in the future. I'm sure you're going to do great things. And I'm sure that many of you will come back and either face-to-face or in a Zoom lecture to the next generation of international communication students or advertising, integrated advertising communication students. So it was a pleasure to talk to all of you tonight. Congratulations. If you come to the ceremony tomorrow night, the virtual ceremony, you will hear from me again for about 4 minutes, as well as other speakers. So I invite you to come, celebrate, and I hope to see many of you back here in July. Those of you that can come back for the face-to-face ceremony, I'd be very happy to shake your hand then. Congratulations, all of you. Basilio, I'll turn it back to you.
Well, thank you so much, Dean Gerstner. And if I may take a moment to congratulate you for being the de facto dean of our Collins College of Professional Studies. You have served for almost over a year now as an interim, and it's a relief to know that you are a dean for us and who giving us a steady leadership. And we definitely count on you, and we know you will provide it to us. And we are really, every one of us are really delighted that you are the helm of affairs and taking the leadership on this. It's a difficult time. It's not a time to envy for anyone to being in the leadership of academic leadership. This is a very difficult time, and you don't know which side where you're going to step in and where are the minefields. And so it is very courageous of you to take on the responsibility. And at the same time, it's wonderful for the college that you are taking on the responsibility. So on my part, I assure you my full support on your endeavors. And I'm sure my colleagues will be along with me as well in supporting you. So thanks, congratulations. And at the same time, be assured of our cooperation and of our collaboration. That's more important for a team than congratulating, right? So,
and I say this only half in jest. I became the interim dean on about April 15th, 2020. I mean, it couldn't have been a worse time, right? We were just in the throes of the terror that was the pandemic. And what I tell everybody is, hey, the bar was kind of low for me because who knew what to expect? On the other side of that coin, I will say with all truth, it can only get better, right? My job can only get better and the environment can only get better, and I'm happy to serve. And thanks to folks like Basilio and Mark and Neil, I see you all here. You make my job a lot easier and you all make me look good. So thanks.
Thank you. So now we are going to do our own little powwow here. And if I may invite our speakers to share their thoughts. I told them very clearly. I had this frequent conversations with Khadija, who wanted to see. She asked me, what do you want me to say? I said, I don't want to say anything. I want you to say something. It's not my agenda. It is your agenda. You tell us, you have gone through this primary school, elementary school, secondary school, now higher education. What do you see? You're already in the one foot in the workplace in some form or the other. How are you seeing it from bottom up? You know, and so and I said to you in one of my emails, be creative, be imaginative, and at the same time, think ahead and see where the world is going to go, and draw from your own experiences. And if I may invite right now to Sam Dodon.
Sure, I'll start off. And first of all, I just want to congratulate everyone who's graduating or finishing up, and also congratulations to the Dean on your appointment. I'm very grateful to be speaking with you all tonight. And my thought concerning education during the entire COVID pandemic is that I just want to summarize my thoughts into a single word, and that word would be equity. I think that this pandemic in a lot of ways has been the big equalizer when it comes to education, because it's kind of removed students from the classroom environment and it's taken everybody home. And I've been thinking a lot about equal access to internet and to resources for online learning. And I think that has been the big challenge in terms of continuing. I think that a lot of students, it's been challenging for them. It's been challenging for their families, because when I'm thinking about education, I didn't know if I should have prepared to discuss it on the university level or just overall, because I'm also thinking about students from like pre-K to 12, like the entire education system. I don't know if you want me.
It's up to you. It's up to you. I don't know if you're asking me.
Okay, sorry.
Sam, please take over. It's your brain, it's your ideas.
Okay, sure. Yes, so that's basically what I've been thinking about. I think that during the pandemic, there has been a lot of changes. For example, a lot of schools have abandoned standardized testing requirements for entrance. And I think that's probably one change that could we can carry forward into the future. Also, dividing up online learning and also in class. I think that this semester, it's been really flexible. And also during the past semester as well, where some students have been able to commute to class while other students are able to remain home. And still, it's been challenging, I think, for the professors. I'm not an educator, I can't really give that perspective, but as a student, I think that having that balance has been really helpful for us in terms of just navigating everything we've gone through and experienced with the pandemic. And I think that what I'm really anticipating moving forward is perhaps that I think that having gone through this experience, we'll be better prepared for the next challenge that arises, whether it's another pandemic and whether it's another situation that really forces us from the classroom environment, and it's gonna really force educators to be more creative. I just have a lot of thoughts that I'm really trying to parse through, but perhaps we can go to somebody else and come back to me.
Okay, all right, I'll come back to you because I already have a couple of questions for you.
Sure.
Okay, let me ask Taryn. Taryn, please.
No, I wanted to, I mean, I love what Sam is saying, and I would just briefly expand on it by the recognition that I think, I love the word he used as equity, the great equalizer. I think I'll expand on that by noting that I think COVID has really brought forward for educational communities the recognition that our path to learning is not monolithic. We're talking about how, you know, having to bring our educations home with us and learning from home has really shed light on people's different situations. And in the same classroom, the different access to resources that are within that classroom. These are all things that I think educators have always known about, but now it's been really brought to the forefront and something that we have to actively try to assist with and accommodate. Also recognizing that I don't think these problems were new. Again, they're just coming to light, and they're more at the forefront with COVID. And so one thing that I'm positive I think that can come out of this, and Sam spoke on it beautifully, I think, is the recognition that when we allow ourselves to be flexible and allow ourselves to recognize that the path to education and learning is meant to be, you know, something that we allow other people to approach in their own creative way and on their own terms. There's nothing wrong with that. I do not think that it devalues our education, and I do not think that it takes away from the experience. If anything, I think it makes it more accessible to all students and all people seeking to better themselves through an education.
Okay, thanks, Taryn. May I invite, ask James Whitley? James, you're with us.
Yes, hello. Hi. First of all, I just want to say thank you for the invitation, Professor. It's an honor to be here tonight and kind of speak upon not only my experiences, but the whole entire question of the future of education. Just a little bit about myself. I spent the past 6 years at St. John's University. I came here. I'm originally from the Philadelphia area. Wanted to leave the quote unquote little city, as I referred to it, in Philadelphia, and come to the big city in New York. And I fell in love with St. John's just with the location and the department and everything it had to offer. I started my undergrad as a government and politics major, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It gave me a really interesting outlook on not necessarily how politics in the United States works, but also governments around the world and how they cohabitate. And then furthermore, I went into the College of Professional Studies. I hope that's right. Yeah, College of Professional Studies, and got my master's in international communication, singular. And I think that's really important to notify the singularity, because I know Professor Montero and a lot of people others in the department kind of clarified the difference between communications plurally versus communication in a single form. And beyond that, I've also been honored to get positions on campus and work through the Student Affairs Department, operations specifically. So I have nothing but gratitude to share or to give to St. John's. It's given me an amazing experience and put me in a position for where I am today. I accepted a job a month ago at a advertising firm that's based in the UK. So I was able to kind of use my international communication background to promote what I can kind of give to the department that has a base in New York City. So it's really put me in a really good position. And specifically, there's been classes that, thank you, Khadija, and everyone else, but there's been specific classes that I've taken here at St. John's that put me in a very good position. And it's been the ones that have been less traditional, if you will. Myself, I've always been a fan of coming into a classroom a long 3 hour on Wednesdays I usually had in my undergrad for gov classes. I'd come in and I'd sit down and the professor would walk in and for 3 hours straight, just give us a lecture, this, and this. It was one of my favorite courses just because I was always amazed at the intellect of the professors that were all over St. John's. And that definitely continued into my graduate degree with Professor Montero, Professor Mark, and everyone else in the program. It's been fascinating. I love sitting down, just taking out a notebook and listening and kind of taking all this information. But I've definitely found that it was the alternative classes that I not necessarily learned more in, but it put me in a position to use that different knowledge to work. For example, I want to say last year it was a class with you, Professor Montero, where we joined with universities all around the world, in Brazil, the UK, Amsterdam, and no, I'm sorry, not UK, Spain. And it was a collaborative effort. We all joined groups, and the prompt was building a bee farm in Africa. And you had to battle time zones and language barriers to work with a group of international students who you never even met before, to kind of create an idea that is unique enough to be implemented in real world technology, but also creative enough to get you a good grade in the class. No, and it represented and presented multiple challenges, not only to get a good grade, but to be able to facilitate the communication between people when for me, it's 9 a.m. and for people in the UK, it's 6, 7 p.m. So it's been, the courses of that have been really interesting. And there was another, when I was an undergrad in government politics, it was just a basic history course on American government, but we used it more as a role model course, a role playing course, excuse me. And at the beginning of the semester, we all got different roles, different parts of the country where whether it be a senator, representative, and you had a list of things you needed to accomplish and a list of things that you needed to make sure didn't happen. And essentially for the whole semester, we used the information that was given to us, and we kind of just combated with each other verbally over what we needed and how we can get it. So it's definitely those alternative courses that I've taken have kind of stayed with me alongside these long 2-3 hour lectures that we had to sit in, and kind of going into the future, especially now that the pandemic, where we're all, as we are right now, online. It's kind of forced us to put aside these group projects and focus just on getting through Zoom and WebEx courses for the full 2 hours, just because the transition itself has been interesting. I often look forward to walking to and from class, because it kind of gave me a time to, whether it be going to class, prepare, or leaving class, have a little decompressing time where I could reflect and think about what we spoke about. So transitioning online was just been different, not only for the class itself, but before and after, as well as it took away some things. I know there was other people in the group, but every year Professor Montero promotes a group to go to the CUNES conference. And I remember we were supposed to go, Professor, to London in June of 2020. But obviously the pandemic kind of put that in a tailspin. I had my bags packed and everything. Ticket was bought. I was excited to do be in another position to learn more about international communication and being able to work with people from all different backgrounds. But obviously it was moved online, and the transition to WebEx was difficult itself. But that brings me into my next thing, where is the future of being able to kind of build this global village, as Marshall McLuhan kind of coined a long time ago, and being able to communicate with people who are all around the world. I know right now in my position at work, the New York office is the hub for all of North America. So just today I was in a call where it was noon in New York, and I was on a phone call with somebody from Portland, Oregon, and it was 9 a.m. So kind of being able to work with people through these online platforms has kind of opened up a new world, not only for education, but for work in general. And going off of this global village idea that Marshall McLuhan created, and kind of bringing everyone from around the world and making it as if they're your next door neighbor. And through Zoom, you can have that, just being able to call everybody. But again, going back to the education, I have nothing but gratitude. There's been many experiences where I've been able to learn things that I wouldn't be able to learn if I were to be homeschooled or had my brother or sister teach me everything. So I have nothing but gratitude and optimism for the future. I know the transition has been tough, but if I could just give my two main professors this semester, Professor Montero and Professor Mark, it's a huge shout out. They were able to take what they could from the in-person classes and transition online. And it was the most seamless transition I could even imagine. I know at the beginning of the semester and throughout this semester, actually, we were able to go into the classroom as well, which is nice because it kind of brought back the same feeling as what it was before the pandemic, but obviously it wasn't perfect. But just that seamless transition was everything I needed as a student to be prepared to succeed for the class itself. So I can very much see the university using Zoom and WebEx in the future, and being able to communicate with students all around the world. I know, especially in Marillac, we have these beautiful camera and projector systems. So it was really cool to see them actually be put to use, because I remember when I first got to campus in St. John's, I just thought it was a way to see your PowerPoint from the front of the room. So we're definitely in a really good position to excel, but my eagerness and optimism in the future, it exceeds no bounds. So thank you very much.
Thanks, James. Thank you so much. And thank you for your kind words. Khadija, there you are. It's your time.
For sure. So thank you again for just like having me here. I'm just excited to, get the conversation going. And so I have a little bit of a different trajectory than James. He talks a little bit about kind of like, how he's just been able to use, international communication for his job. But with me specifically, and anyone that knows me and has gotten a chance to meet me would know that music has always been where my passion lies. And so because of that, I've used my education within international communications to just, foster a little bit of like marketing campaigns or even events, public relations, and just using communications in that sense. And so, when I was thinking about what to say during this conversation, I kind of asked myself the same question, like, what is the future of higher education? And honestly, if I had to answer in one word, I would say it's uncertain, right? So the reason is because it's not, because of COVID. And I know that was one of the main topic that everyone was touching on. But for me, it wasn't because of COVID, but it was because everything around us in the world that we see it is constantly changing. And, we're living proof of that. So when I look at it, higher education is not always, the right thing to do. And when I say that, I mean our education system, and someone, touched on this before, but our education system has programmed us, especially as students, to think about the different stages of life. We go through middle school, then high school, college, and then we jump right into the working field. But the truth is there's just so many examples around us that prove, quite the opposite. It proves that, we can take career pivots and that we can still be successful. So, I mentioned, being in music. And so I kind of wanted to provide two examples of people that immediately jump in my mind. And I hope that you guys, these names sound a little bit familiar, but taking Jay-Z as an example, right? So once again, my interest in music lies in music. And so with that, I'm not sure if you guys knew, but Jay-Z, he never completed his high school education, nor did he receive a degree, yet he is one of the most successful rappers within music. And on the other hand, we have J. Cole, which, some of you may also learn along the way, is a St. John's graduate. And with that, both of these individuals, they took different paths, they stuck to their dreams, they hustled, they still rose to the top. And those are attributes that are not necessarily taught within a curriculum in school. However, what is taught, and especially some things that I've been able to learn too within international communications was, how important it is, to meet deadlines and, learning how to collaborate with others, and kind of taking leadership as you work on projects and things like that. So these are, just some of the few skills that we do need as we transition into our full-time jobs. And I kind of wanted to, touch a little bit on that from a broader scope or a general scope, so to speak. So, the future of higher education is neither good or bad. And when we take examples like Jay-Z and like J. Cole, we'll realize that there is no linear path to success. And, the category also of success, is how we define it. So even something like that, we don't learn within the education system. So, I also wanted to take this time to also expand on my personal story and kind of how St. John's as, an institution has helped me get land a full-time position, so to speak. So I remember just coming into St. John's not really knowing what I wanted to do, and so I kind of began in psychology. And as I went throughout my different years, I noticed that I was drawing more to communications, and I ended up landing myself in different internship opportunities, freelancing. So happened that one of those people was Jay-Z. And so I just continued to just work really hard. And within that, once again, I was networking. And so with that came kind of understanding the music business side of things. So when I had a minor in music, I didn't necessarily know, how I wanted to use it. And it's because of St. John's that I understood that, there's a whole music business behind it. Once again, you can do that marketing, and you could do, tour management. You can really, do a lot of behind the scenes work. And it's because of, taking that path that St. John's has allowed me to realize that. And so, I just continue to expand on my personal network. And I've noticed that even being a part of the university, I've been able to just, honestly, I've just been able to realize that St. John's bleeds outside of campus. Whenever I'm speaking to someone else who may be, within the same industry as me, we can automatically, form a connection, because we can, just talk about how we both had Professor Montero, or we both had Professor Mark, and just, talking a little bit about what we liked, what we disliked, what we thought could be improved, and things like that. And because of that, I've, moved higher in ranking too, whenever I'm applying for jobs and different things like that, to meeting the hiring manager, because I've been able to form those connections. So, I'd say that institutional learning in general, but definitely does have, like, the positives and its negatives. But in the end, it's what you make it to be. It's because of St. John's that I've been able to form, like, my own nonprofit company, where I help other people in music kind of, like, land internships and land jobs. And it's just learning how to shape myself and shape my mind. And I think that that's just, like, part of my growth, which is, once again, something that institutions cannot necessarily teach, but it's because of what we've been learning and how we've been shaping our minds around it, that it's been, such a success. So yeah, that's a little bit about what I'm thinking.
Thank you so much, Khadija. Also, if I may, for sharing that very honest to goodness, your own thoughts about it. But also, it's good for everybody to know that recently, Khadija was a visiting lecturer at Northwestern University. It's a prestigious institution, and she was the visiting lecturer there about her work and the thing. And then she did a terrific job, and I have the recording of it. So
you do?
Yes. I written a nice story about you on our institute's website, so you can find it there. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. So you are there, immortalized on our website. So for your lecturing at Northwestern University, because it gives us great pride that you had the opportunity to lecture there. They didn't invite me as yet, so I'm just kidding. So
I'll tell them to put you on the schedule next time.
No. So I'll come back to, you're raising some very interesting questions. And one of the questions that you're raising is mentoring. Not everything can be taught in the classroom, the curriculum, but what role does mentoring plays for the future of education? So I think you kind of bringing us to that conversation. So we'll come back to that, okay? So start thinking about that. So Kafu, where are you? I call her Kafu affectionately. Her actual name is Claren Kaufold.
Yes, sir. Okay, so to follow behind all of my endearing classmates and just kind of like where the direction of this conversation and this whole discussion is going, a lot of this will, like, I have like so many notes about just everything that I'd like to share, but then also some of it is I'll be shooting from the hip, just from a lot of things that Khadija was saying was just incredible, because when she was talking about the non-traditional ways of, meeting success, and all I could think about was just like my own personal experience. And, cause like when I was in my early 20s, and I might be telling on my age a little bit there, but when I was in my early 20s, it's just like all of my friends were, like straight out of high school going right into college. And I never really took that route, and then like when I was in my middle 20s, then I decided to join the military. And then I found myself with you lovely people, afterward. And it was just, it was such a interesting transition from like all over the place and not doing it, I guess, what would be considered the right way. But it's like, I'm still here nonetheless, you know, and I've still obtained my graduate degree nonetheless. And, you know, and now I can really do anything, and, you know, and I can network with such amazing people and have discussions like this, you know. So it's just, I really, really, really enjoyed that part that Khadijat brought up. But also the other thing here was COVID-19 sort of that kiss of death that like we really needed to see or needed to have in order to reflect on the way how we're learning. And again, going against tradition in the sense, it's like, is having to go to traditional brick and mortar university, like sitting in a desk in class, like does that still render like, you know, having to be so mandated and so mandatory in order to still achieve, you know, like what we all have, like, you know, we still graduated going through Zoom and Cisco WebEx and stuff. So that was some of the things. I know from the discussion panel that you sent to all of us and everything, that all of the people on the panel, there were comments from Melissa Labonte. I don't know, were these all professors?
Professors, yes.
Mm-hmm. Call them all doctors then. So from Dr. Labonte and Father Dennis has so many incredible things to say, you know, especially how he started kind of like, well, not he started, but he was relating our education system to the business model and marketing, and just kind of like how education is sort of becoming so deregulated in the sense of where it's like, we can now sort of do an a la carte type of education where we can get classes from Straighterline. We can be educated through YouTube. We could be educated through Coursera and, you know, all the above. So it's just kind of like, as professors and as educators, my question to all of you is really just, I'm not trying to be rude in a sense of like asking like, is this all still relevant? But it's like, since everything is changing, it's like, how does all of this still remain legitimate? And also with just, and again, like with my own personal experience, especially during COVID, and I know a certain professor sitting on this board right now can attest to this, but it's like, I was already having a hard time coming to class. And so it was just like, when COVID happened, it was just like this whole way how we started coming to class afterward. Oh, and that was another thing that Dr. Levinson had brought up, how he noticed such an increase of productivity in his students transitioning from like, you know, traditional class and then just doing online, you know, whether if like if the class was recorded, you know, like the student could just catch it afterward, you know, even if they couldn't attend at that time, you know, instead of like, oh, like my house broke down, you know, or like my dog ate my homework kind of thing, which is, you know, what was causing whatever kind of reasons why students can't make it to class. But I know for me, it's like, I would have never been able to achieve the type of GPA that I did if, like, you know, unfortunately, like this had to happen, but it's just like, I don't know. It was just like, there was, and again, like, this is just from my own perspective and like just what I was, you know, going through and like just kind of whatever struggles of like, you know, me coming to class or whatever. But it's like, I know I also can't be the only one, you know? So it's just like to have this kind of ability to, instead of like having to come to classes, like if I can at least just go online, you know, but still be considered just as much a student of our institution, still have like the same kind of accreditation, still kind of have the, you know, I'm just as good as the next guy, you know. It's like, why can't these things be considered? Why can't these things be respected? And then furthermore, I know another professor on the board, she was saying, I don't know if she was sort of against the thought of students kind of having this newfound concept of like how they can complete their education, but it's just like, is this something that is too far-fetched? And I know Taryn was even mentioning it, you know, it's like these have been problems, you know, these have been issues, because it's like, I know I can't be the only student who has gone through these things myself. You know, we all have things going on in our daily lives. Maybe even the time that we have to come to class might not even work with our own schedules, you know? So it's just kind of like to be fresh and be even able to give something back into the class, especially like, you know, if we have to discuss things, it's like, how do we now maintain this within the new curriculum? Like, is this going to be an ongoing possibility, and will it continue there? I think you know, the music will start playing for me and I'll let it go to somebody else. But these are just my thoughts that I wanted to share and to report into our whole discussion here. I don't know if anybody has anything that they'd like to say on it, or if we're just going to keep going. But
very good. Thank you so much, Kafu. We'll come back to that. We'll come back for the conversation. And now may I invite Marin?
Hello, everyone. Very importantly, before I dive in, I want to thank you, Dr. Montero, for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts with you all today, and also just coordinating this wonderful event. I've already gotten so many insights from what everyone's been saying. It's really great to hear your experiences. So I had a lot of broader thoughts on higher education as a holistic system and its role in the US. And my friends will tell you, especially as I was discussing this with them, trying to prepare for this, that I'm the type of person who has a lot of facts and a lot of feelings. So to organize my thoughts in a cohesive way, I prepared a statement. It'll expand on some of the ideas Taryn, Sam, James, Claire, and honestly, all of you guys have been touching on, especially when it comes to that notion of a hybrid education model. And hopefully it'll help lead to more questions and discussions later. So if you guys don't mind, I'd love to go through that with you. So a bit of my background before I begin. My name is Marin Ruelas Mendoza. I currently live in Virginia, just south of Washington, D.C., and I work in public affairs at the National Security Commission on Artificial Intelligence. This fall, I will be entering my final semester of the Integrated Advertising Communications Master's Program, and I've been a student at St. John's for over 4 years now and graduated as part of the class of 2020 with my undergraduate in communication arts. So to say we're living in a unique time in history is a major understatement. 15 months ago, the world as we knew it was turned on its head by a once-in-a-100-year global crisis. I don't need to sit here and tell you about how the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted every facet of our society, from the devastating loss of life, the massive changes in the labor force and job market, and the big life events canceled and postponed. It bears addressing that the world of higher education was also dramatically disrupted. I'm certain that all of us here have our own lived experiences of this upheaval. You all have already shared so many of those valuable experiences here with us tonight. And the very fact we are on this call and not meeting in person in itself speaks to that experience. It seems like around every corner through this process, there was some public figure saying we were turning a corner on the pandemic. And now we are finally privileged enough to be seeing a genuine change of pace. We are finally turning the corner on this crisis and beginning a new chapter. But where do we go from here? To understand where we're going, first, we must understand where we've been. Before the pandemic, there was a trend of increasing costs for higher education. In fact, tuition across US institutions, not even counting additional fees, has doubled over the past 40 years. This trend, along with increasing burdens of student debt, has many people asking themselves, is this all really even worth it? Of course, it depends on the individual circumstances, but for a large portion of American society, I would argue that higher education can be a solid investment. For instance, according to data from the Minnesota Population Center's 2017 American Community Survey, there can be dramatic differences in earnings depending on whether or not one has a college degree. Washington, D.C. has the highest pay disparity between college and non-college graduates with a 167% difference in earnings. California and New York follow closely behind with 133% and 103% differences respectively. For low-income students, college degrees may be the single best engine for social mobility. According to the Pew Charitable Trust, for those who grow up below the poverty line, if they can graduate from college, they have a 90% chance of escaping poverty. The benefits of having a degree seem clear, but any positive trends towards equity in many aspects of our society, including in the realm of higher education, have shifted with the trauma brought on by the pandemic. The pandemic has created a social wound where many lower income students had to take on full-time jobs to support themselves and their families and cannot afford either time-wise or monetarily to attend school. Thus, they are getting trapped in a vicious cycle where they have to either postpone or completely forego that key tool for social mobility. The COVID-19 crisis has brought to light incredibly important needs to consider a very necessary cultural shift in higher education, how we view that process, and who we view as prospective students. If we as a collective society learn nothing else from the pandemic, it needs to be that we are only as secure as the most vulnerable members of our society. It is the responsibility of those of us with privilege to raise up those pushed to the margins. And I know here at St. John's, uplifting the poor and marginalized is a core component of the Vincentian mission and a noble cause that I think we not only need to uphold, but set as an example for others to follow. The post-pandemic future of higher education needs to be inclusive, it needs to be affordable, and it needs to be accessible. We have to change our idea of who is fit for college, and we have to commit institutional efforts and resources to support and reach them. Education is meant to be an egalitarian process that opens up empathy and understanding, as well as allows for people to gain empowerment and mobility. We have to make a consistent effort to reach out to marginalized communities and build a place for them in the very fabric of our higher education systems. If not for moral reasons, then for the economic reason that consistent US demographic trends towards an aging population will continue to diminish the pool of prospective students, and that universities will need to broaden that pool as much as possible in order to sustain themselves. For better or for worse, if there's one thing a crisis is good at, it's sparking large-scale changes. The way we learned has changed with the pandemic, and it will continue to change as we adjust to the life on the other side of this seismic event. Last March, faculty and students alike were suddenly thrust into the world of online learning. I've heard a lot of my classmates talk about issues like burnout, isolation, loss of motivation, and sometimes even just feeling like their efforts were meaningless. Students everywhere have spent the past year mourning the loss of routines, community, and an overall sense of normalcy, and I'm no exception. I know I had my expectations ripped out from under me as the pandemic hit. I had to give up my independence and move from my apartment in New York, away from everything I anticipated my future to be, back home with my family in Virginia. After all the growth I had undergone through my college experience, gaining independence, living abroad, and working my butt off on a daily basis, I felt like I was back to square one. In my childhood bedroom, sleeping next to piles of boxes, using the microwave that once occupied my apartment as a nightstand, with my undergraduate diploma collecting dust on top, and being treated like a teenager all over again. And I consider myself lucky. I know many out there have gone through much worse. Such a sudden transition can be tough on us in the best of times. And for many of us, this digital world and brand new environment with painstaking new obstacles added on to an already challenging academic environment. While the lows of these trials and tribulations could often feel deeper than the Marianas Trench, there are a number of lessons learned and skills acquired that we can build on and carry with us into the future of higher education. I think the biggest of these are flexibility and accessibility, especially those that come with the hybrid learning model, a model that can incorporate as many aspects of in-person and digital synchronous and asynchronous learning as desired by students and staff. I don't want to invalidate people's concerns about struggles that come with a virtual learning environment, because I know a lot of my friends really struggled in the online environment. I mean, it can be difficult, but I do want to point out some positives that can come from integrating more digital infrastructure into our educational process. I personally wasn't a big fan of online learning when we first began. I missed a classroom environment where I could bounce off the energy of my professors and peers. But through the course of the pandemic, even I found that the flexibility of online learning provided the opportunity I needed to work in a way I never had the chance to before as a full-time in-person student. I mean, there are more to students than school. People lead busy, complex lives. And now that it has been proven possible, I think we're going to see an increasing number of prospective students seeking flexible learning programs where they have the opportunity to learn in whatever way is best and most convenient for them, while they still have opportunities to connect with the community, get assistance from professors, and access the physical materials they need in order to find success. Not to mention, there's a newfound accessibility in hybrid environments that can help level the playing field for disabled students who may struggle in solely one environment or the other. A hybrid education model would offer a chance for disabled students to be included in the dominant conversation as opposed to being an exception or an afterthought. Overall, I think the pandemic has shown flexibility in achieving a degree is not only possible, but as a lot of you guys have said, it's necessary now in this new world. If every class had a hybrid approach, it would give people with different priorities and different learning styles more options and opportunities to succeed. Not to mention, a hybrid education would provide students with the tools and skills they need to succeed in a hybrid future of work. After all, let us not forget that the main reason people pursue a college degree is to improve their potential job prospects. Ultimately, it is student expectations that will determine the future of higher education. As students in these institutions, we have the power to advocate for change, demand to participate in the decision-making process, and put our money where our morals are by voting with our wallets and electing the kind of institutions we choose to support. As students, we need to reflect and ask ourselves, what value are we really getting from the higher education system as it exists? What do we want from it in the future? And how do we do our part to steer the ship in that direction? We also need to ask even broader questions, like what role do we want higher education to play in our society? A crisis typically values action over contemplation, but we are transitioning into a new phase where it is time to take a step back and think about what we want to develop and carry forward into the future. The COVID-19 pandemic has given us an opportunity to reevaluate our habits, structures, beliefs, and biases. It has shown us that we don't have to default back to what normal was, because while comfortable for some of us, it didn't serve all of us. Both students and universities need to take bold steps toward building a more inclusive, flexible, and accessible future of education. The very existence of these institutions depends on it. At this point, resistance to change is futile. The future of education isn't just coming, it's already here. And now it's our turn to decide what comes next. Thanks.
Marin, thank you so very, very much. It was a wonderful, insightful, very thoughtful sharing of thoughts that you have. You've given us much to talk, and I've made a bunch of notes. I hope to engage you in a conversation about it. So now we have among us, thanks to Professor Yvonne Platt-Johnson. I see that she's with us already. She joined us a little bit a few minutes ago because she had other meetings to do. And so through her courtesy, we have students from School of Education who have given some thought to this particular topic of the future of education. And may I invite Pamela Eatman-Skinner. She's has been in the field for 25 some years, and now she's doing her doctorate in this area. And so what does she say about it? Pamela?
Good evening, everyone. Can I see a hand or electron? Okay, you with me?
Pamela, my apologies. I was supposed to begin with your song. Would you kindly play your video?
Sure. Would you allow me to share screen?
Yes, please. This was my mistake.
That's okay. All right.
Would have been better if you were to sing live.
Can you make me a co-host and I can share the video?
Oh, sure.
Thank you so much for allowing me to be here, Dr. Platt-Johnson and everyone. It's been wonderful listening to your insightful and eloquent thoughts. So deep and wonderful. If I had to contextualize, there we go, what I would share today, it would be called Build Back Better. I know that's a theme that has been ruminating for the past several months, but it really has meant something very powerful for me. A couple of years ago, I wrote a play called Mr. President, Courage at Midnight. And I wrote a song and I reimagined it through the COVID-19 pandemic, because it seemed that so much had fallen away and so much had been destroyed. And I was thinking, let's build back better. So this is the song. I hope you enjoy it. Here we go.
Justice for all, where every man and woman is counted with courage and strength. We count as our own. We're all a part of the American story, with dignity and fairness for all. Bequeathed with a dream to encourage the people. United we stand, divided we fall. We're all a part of the story. 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 Strength is our name. We are united. Love is our game. We're not divided. We've got the power. We are the people. We can. Strength is our name. We are united. Love is our game. We are not divided. We've got the power. We are the people. We can.
Oh, that's magnificent. That was magnificent. What a nice little interlude to shift from. Yeah, terrific. Thank you so much, Pamela. So please take us on a journey.
I feel like I know you, Dr. Montero, even though I'm just meeting you tonight. You have such a winsome personality. Wow. Build Back Better really has become my marching song. Dr. Montero said that, I've been in education for 25 years. I'm just returning at this wonderful age to finish my doctorate. 3 years ago, I joined the Department of Administration and Instructional Leadership, finished my coursework, passed my comps, yes, ready for the dissertation. So it's been a tremendous semester, and I'm so grateful in the midst of a pandemic. And so much of what you said has been so powerful. So if I had to kind of situate, wow, so I'm really full, honestly, from what you said. Right now, for my professional work, I am the director of CUNY Start and Mass Start for Bronx Community College, CUNY. And as, I don't want to mess up your name, Sharon, as you talked about some of the challenges that students go through, I thought about my students at the college and how so many students are food insecure, how they are living in shelters. They have no technology, using phones while they work to be in class, all kinds of unimaginable things that we from a privileged standpoint may not be able to understand. But yet there's something on the inside of these students that wants to build back better. They are pushing forward, and that is what keeps a log on my fire and keeps me so energized. So if I had to think about the future of education, I would think of it like a trilogy, I guess, three major points. I would think about preparation. We have to change the way we prepare for the future. Wouldn't you say? We can't learn and teach in the same ways that we did when I was coming up in middle school and high school. Everything has changed. And certainly within the last year, our lives have absolutely been upended. In my experience, I had to move my programs from campus-based to all online. Nothing was online. I mean, nothing. So having to change, get the curriculum online and the staff and moving everything forward. So what a transition. But you know what, even though it was such a tremendous stressful time, it was a great time for development. And we can never go back. We can't go back to campus and say, hey, I'm here, we're back. No, it will never be the same. And that's a good thing. So we have to prepare our students with 21st century competencies. We have to prepare them with critical thinking and digital literacy. We have to look at education from a different vantage point. Globalization, internationalization, these things are happening and our students are not ready. I find the students that I work with are struggling to get ready. They do have the intelligence, but they need to build back better, and we can help them. The next P that I would like to look at is what we provide for our students. So my educational background really stands at the intersection of culture, the arts, education, and I think culturally relevant education, diverse ways of thinking and teaching, from the pedagogy to the curricula to everyday, not a cultural band-aid that we put on at certain times of year, but something that we do as the fabric of the way we teach to empower, to elevate, to inspire every student. When you come into the classroom, you should know that something there is going to speak to your heart, that you're going to see a representation of you. And then I think the future of education should provoke something. And you're like, provoke? What kind of word is that to use for education? I want to provoke hope. I want to provoke the student voice, because, you know, in education, traditionally, what the student thinks and has to say really is not centralized. But I think in order for this very tenuous, tender time that we are in presents an incredible opportunity to provoke creativity. Someone may not be able to speak like Megan does, may not be able to think or sing or do anything like that, but everybody has a gift. And as educators, our job is to identify. It's not to try to lump everyone in one bin and make everybody a cookie cutter. No, there are many different paths to get there. I think one of the beauties of this time is that we started really taking blended learning, the flipped classroom, all of those types of things, and actually started doing it. Before COVID, I hated online. education, so I thought. But I have learned to love it, to teach it, to embrace it. And it has opened a brand new world for evening students. What about the non-traditional student? Does anyone care about them? But now the person that's a mother of 3 that may not be able to run to campus and back home may be able to get into a quiet space at home and take advantage of this marvelous modality. So those are, I don't want to take up too much time, but those are some of my thoughts about where we need to go as educators. The future of education is in a challenging, but in a wonderful, wonderful space. I think about the elementary students. A colleague of mine sent a video, and a teacher was bellowing and trying to pull the best out of the students. Some of the students were in bed. Some of the students are challenged during this time. What do you do as a teacher when you have to flip the script or change back over to campus-based learning? How do we redeem the time for those students? We really have to up the ante with teacher preparation, that pre-service time, the mentoring I heard someone mention, all of these points, and you've been talking about it, and I'm so full and I'm so inspired. I do believe, in spite of the socio-political issues and all of the things that are going on, that education is one of the great hopes. And I'm proud to be an educator. I love teaching. I love seeing the light go on in someone's eyes. I love it. And I thank you for just allowing me to share a couple of my thoughts in this
Oh,
form.
thank you so much. Thank you so very much, Pamela. You are a blessing. You know, thank you so very much for sharing your thoughts, sharing your music with us. And it is just been fabulous. And now may I invite Gustavo Lur. He's also has been thinking about it for some time and now is writing his dissertation on shifting educational landscape. Gustavo?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Montero. First off, thank you for having me in this panel. Thank you, Dr. Pratt Johnson, for inviting me. Pleasure to be here and a pleasure to meet everyone. So I recently just defended my dissertation in March, and actually yesterday was officially my graduation. So I'm officially done with my doctorate in instructional leadership. My topic that I focused was I conducted a qualitative study to explore the systems design and leadership practices that are necessary for effective technology integration at the K-12 level during a time of change. It's a mouthful. So what that means is what systems need to be in place and what do leaders such as principals need to do in order to have effective technology integration in districts, in schools at the K-12 level, which is huge right now. So in order to better share my thoughts and my conclusions, I created a short slideshow. It's just a couple of slides. So if you don't mind, Dr. Montero, can I share my screen?
Yes, please. You have I shared with everyone. You can.
All right.
Yeah, you should be able to share it.
Give me 1 minute. Okay, here we go. Let me just present this. So as I collected and analyzed my data in my research, a lot of the points that I'm going to speak about in the next couple of slides derive from that. A lot of the research and a lot of the data that I collected made me come up with these conclusions. And one of the things that is huge, and some of you mentioned it, that we need to think about how to restructure teacher preparation programs to better equip and prepare future teachers for a digital age of teaching and learning, which is happening right now. As many of you have mentioned, due to the current pandemic, it amplified technology integration efforts for K-12 teachers. And because of that, now more than ever, these teachers are expected to use technology in remote and interactive ways to meet the needs of the 21st century learner today. Teachers currently are in the midst of an evolution of technology within their instruction. So when I think about the future of education, I couldn't help but to think about what I found in my study, and which is that it is time to start shifting teacher mindsets away from the notion that technology only provides a supplemental teaching tool, and acknowledge that it can transform instruction, which a lot of teachers have experienced this current year and last year during the school closures. So most teacher preparation programs, as the research says, do not prepare teachers for that transformation. So that's why I think it's important for the current teacher preparation programs to restructure the way they equip and prepare these future teachers, because now they're entering a hybrid and a remote landscape. So that's one main conclusion. Another main conclusion that I came up with from my dissertation is that not only do teacher preparation programs need to be restructured, but also leader preparation programs. These leader preparation programs in higher institutions need to better prepare future leaders, because now more than ever, it's a big need for them to become technology leaders. Leaders currently are, and when I speak about leaders, not just at the building level, but also district level too, like superintendents and all the different leaders at the district level and building level. Now they're tasked with transforming and developing the educational systems that they're in amid this technology boom that rapidly digitized the teaching and learning. The systems set in place by these leaders are able to create the means and the foundation for teachers to effectively integrate technology within their instruction. As some prior studies have argued, many school leaders consider themselves unprepared to assume the role of a technology leader. And when I say technology leader, I'm speaking about that's the role that they're facing right now. They're transforming the way they're leading the buildings, because now we're entering remote and hybrid learning. And as such, they need to be technology leaders. They need to know what it is, what are some effective practices and systems that they need to put in place. So with that said, educational leadership programs are the key agents. And this is what I was saying with the teacher programs, but also the educational leadership programs are the key agents for teaching these 21st century leaders and teaching them that the knowledge and the skills that are necessary for effective technology integration efforts for schools and districts. Once educational leaders embrace these evolving roles, such as their technology leadership, then they can effectively lead and prepare their schools and districts for decades to come. Lastly, one of the, and my dissertation didn't focus on this, but I added this because as I was reading the current research and more current research, a lot of it spoke about the digital divide and the equity piece. And I know a lot of you spoke about that. I think it was Sam and Taryn, and that's huge right now. And the fact that it's been amplified now, we need to start thinking about that, and not only start thinking about it, but making action on it. The biggest thing about the digital divide, which has to do with equity, is that not all districts have the available resources or are well funded to provide sustainable instructional technology system design, which right now districts and schools are figuring out. Some have more funds than others, and unfortunately, inner city school districts, that's where the huge gap is, and they don't. And these are ongoing issues of student equal access to technology between various demographic sectors. And I've seen this firsthand professionally. I'm currently a K-12 technology coach, instructional technology coach for Glen Cove City School District in Long Island, which is a suburban school district. However, prior to that, I was a tenured teacher in upstate Albany. I was an elementary school teacher for Albany School District for 7 years. And Albany School District is a big inner city school district. So I was able to see the vast differences from inner city teaching an inner city school district and a suburban school district. And also growing up, I grew up in an inner city neighborhood. I originally grew up in Jamaica, Queens, also Jackson Heights. And a lot of those things that were brought up, I've experienced as a student. So with that said, the COVID pandemic has brought to light, which is very important, the digital divide that exists between many school districts across the nation, especially between urban and suburban school districts. It is concerning, however, that less attention has been paid to this digital equity aspect of technology leadership within the research base, meaning I didn't find a lot of articles that spoke about it. There were some, but not as much as there should be, being that this digital divide has been going on historically for a very long time. It's not just something new. Financial challenges exist to maintain and expand the technology infrastructure in low poverty schools, and that's a fact. Lastly, there must be more research spotlighting the digital divide within K-12 technology integration efforts. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Gustavo. And you're absolutely right on particularly the technology divide, digital divide. It is a very serious concern. And now may I invite Kevin Scanlon? Kevin?
Hello, Doctor. How are you? And thank you to everyone for tonight. And congratulations to those who have finished. And hopefully a few of us will be finished soon too. So yeah. I think I'm batting cleanup with all this, so I'm not sure if I'm the last one or not. So
yes, you're the last one.
I also have a presentation as well. Just give you a little bit about my background. I can share my screen. Is that okay?
Yes, please. Yeah, you can share your screen.
Okay. Okay. So when I spoke to Dr. Pratt Johnson, she was saying about speaking to the future of education. So the topic I'm going to talk about is about the diversity, equity, and inclusion in the future. So give you a little bit about my background. I'm currently the Assistant Superintendent for Educational Services in Three Village Central School District, which is in Stony Brook, New York, out on Long Island. This is my 29th year in education. I started my career in New York City school systems. The school I was in actually has closed, but I got my first job because I was observing and I tackled a kid with a knife in the hallway who had just stabbed a teacher, and the following morning the principal hired me. So that's how I got my position. It's you kind of acquire things as you go along. So, but I've worked in 6 different school districts in Connecticut, New York City, and Long Island over the past 29 years. So my presentation is a little long, but I promise I'll get through it quickly, and hopefully I can shed a little light on some of the things we're doing as well in my area. So as I mentioned, my district is on Long Island. Our demographics are a little different than some of the areas around us. Our largest minority population is Asian. We have 12% of our population is Asian, 5% Hispanic, and less than 1% Black. The rest is Caucasian. But we have a huge dichotomy of wealth. We have families that we have a 10% poverty level, which is small comparatively to some other districts. But we also at the other end have people that are paying $650,000 in property tax. So it's a big divide. The past year, we actually started to address the issues of racism and social justice in the community prior to all of the DEI that was being discussed. So we started an anti-racism and social justice committee, and we brought in a national consultant, Dr. Terrence Roberts. If you don't know who Dr. Roberts is, he was part of the Little Rock Nine back in 1957, where they integrated the Little Rock, Arkansas school system. So we have been working with him for the past year, and it's been a remarkable experience. Dr. Roberts is a national consultant. He actually works with the FBI, big Fortune 500 companies like Coca-Cola. And he's been meeting with us in our district level committees and our school level committees. So one of the things that he brought up one time was that someone approached him and asked him, "Who are you?" And he said, "Well, I'm Terrence Roberts, a person just like you." Not realizing that this gentleman has a PhD and is nationally acclaimed and world famous. And that kind of solidified the humility of his message with people. And what he communicated in his presentation to us was, who I am today is not who I was yesterday or who I'll be tomorrow. And I think that's so important to realize that as educators and going into the educational field, we're developing the tomorrow. We are helping make the future that we're going to have for all of our students and children in the future. So he talked about telling our own story. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my background. In addition to my educational experience, I'm the youngest of 11 in my family, 8 boys, 3 girls, 1 bathroom. Anyone that has had a big family like that can appreciate the fact of having 1 bathroom, how you can hold your bladder for a long period of time. So my parents were from the Depression era, World War II. My grandparents, one of my grandparents was an immigrant, Irish and Polish background, Catholic. But my family with 11 children are multiracial, ethnic, and religious backgrounds. We have so many different experiences and backgrounds from all over the world. I think my family single-handedly contributed to the population explosion. I have presently over 50 nieces and nephews and great nieces and nephews. So if you came to my house on Thanksgiving, someone will just hand you a plate and tell you to go to the kitchen, the food's there. So that's what you get with the experience with a large family. So, but growing up, my dad had a good job. He had worked for IBM, but with 11 kids, money didn't go too far. So you kind of learned how to deal with what you didn't know you didn't have sometimes. Looking at education, education was emphasized in my family and it was considered very important. But as we move forward with the history of education in this country, in our early history in this nation, education was only meant for the wealthy. They were the only ones who could afford to send their children to school. And through the years of education changes in the United States, religious orders, just like the Vincentian order and other orders, helped spread Catholic education and education in general to areas of communities that didn't have the ability to do that. When public education came along, it was truly, as other folks have mentioned, the great equalizer for a lot of children and families. It doesn't matter how much money you have or where you come from, you're entitled to an education, a public education in this nation. And that's unique in many ways at the time that was created. So we're still working on that though. Recently, the New York State Board of Education developed a policy on diversity, equity, and inclusion that just came out in April. And I provided some links in the presentation. I'll be happy to share the presentation with everyone. And you can click on these. These are the recent proposals, and now will be policies that'll be in place for all schools, all 770 school districts in the state of New York for next year. So the New York State School Boards Association is developing a board policy framework for everyone to use as well. But these documents I'm going to touch upon these a little bit as we move forward, and the importance of what the state is looking at. One of the major points is the 4 principles within the document. And the state is looking for this concept of welcoming and affirming environments. And when we think about are our schools welcoming? Do our children feel welcome when they come in? Do the staff feel welcome? Do parents feel welcome? We're looking for high expectations and rigorous instruction of our students. We're looking for our students to succeed, whether it's college and career readiness, if it's to go off to college, or if it's to go into a career field. What will be their choice? We often emphasize going to college for everyone, but I will tell you that there's some career paths that make much more money than some people that finish a 4-year college degree in this world. And we don't think about that as being an important aspect, but without those people doing those jobs, we would never truly get some of the things done in this nation that get done. And the idea of ongoing and systemic professional development. It's not good enough that we do one-shot deals with professional development people. We need to make it part of who we are and continue it for years and years as our system develops. So one of the suggestions, one of the things I've been thinking about when Dr. Pratt Johnson contacted me about this was changing our vocabulary, moving into some new terminology. And in my district, we work with Carol DeWick's growth mindsets. We actually changed our report cards to fit this, that students aren't there yet. How do you tell a kindergarten child that they failed? It's not that they failed, they're not there yet. At 5 years old, you haven't failed. You haven't just gotten there. And it will take time. If they knew everything they needed to know at that age, they could just graduate from St. John's University then, they'd be all set. But they're not there yet. And I've looked at this term tolerance. In my experience in 29 years in education, this term has been used over and over again. My wife has to tolerate my bad jokes. You have to tolerate your in-laws when they come for holiday dinners and things like that. But we shouldn't be talking about other different peoples in the world and people unlike you and tolerating them. That word is such a negative connotation. So much so that my colleague, who's the director of curriculum, elementary curriculum for us, has actually written to the Tolerance Education magazine, and they're changing their name. That's how much we've campaigned for this concept. And it isn't even about acceptance, because you don't have to accept what someone is. You may not believe in what they're doing, and they might not believe in you. So it's not really about that. But I think it's more, as a former social studies teacher, about developing an understanding and appreciation of other people and other cultures and trying to walk through their shoes. So we really have to look at where we're coming from with all of that. So in those documents that I just mentioned from the state, they talk about the concept of a single story. And sometimes that single story becomes the only story. And this really emphasizes the bias that has existed in some of our educational practices throughout our history and the stereotypes that we've developed on different peoples and cultures. And Winston Churchill said that history is written by the victors. And if you look at social studies books, the social studies book back when I was in elementary school 40 some odd years ago been condensed. What I learned in that history has been condensed. And we did not learn all the histories of all the different cultures, of all the groups of people that exist in this nation. And I think that was a sad piece to it. So when I went to college, my undergraduate major was in Middle Eastern history. And that sounds unusual for someone that was a young person going through all that, but that interested me and I wanted to pursue that path. And it has helped serve me well. It's led to me getting job offers and things because of that unique background. When we talk about America, we always use that expression, the great melting pot. But my grandmother used to use a term of a patchwork quilt, because all the different pieces of who we are come together to make the beauty of our country. When you melt something, it just kind of melds it all together. You lose your identity because you get assimilated with everything else. But that patchwork quilt concept, everyone's piece of who they are contributes to making it beautiful. So I think that's the idea where we need to try to move our thinking with the idea with education. So I wanted to leave with some thoughts about where we're going in my district, and hopefully other people are following suit as well. As I said, and Dr. Lohr has said, the idea that it has to be a systemic response to a systemic problem. This isn't just something we give lip service to, do a presentation or send someone to a one-time conference. We have to put this into our inner working and have it go on with everything we're doing. We're experiencing some changeover in our staff. We're going to probably replace 40% of our staff in my district in the next 4 years, just through retirements. And we know that we're going to have to make sure the professional doing what we're doing, we're going to have to keep doing, so that the new people coming on board have that understanding and that background. We have to listen, as a few folks have said, about the student voice. It's so important to hear what students' needs are. That student voice really should help guide where we're going with our instruction. We also have to be aware of our own biases. I grew up in a fairly middle-class town, but my background and where I came from, I had friends from all different cultures. When I went to high school, it took a nun that told me that the reason why you don't get invited to parties is because your best friend is Black. And that was a shocking thing to me to hear at 17 years of age, that I wasn't being invited to stuff because of who my friends were, because of who these other people are. And that really stuck with me, and it made me stronger in realizing that we need to do something even at that age. We also need to be able to understand how to use data. And so often when we look at what the numbers say to us, we don't truly know how to understand or decipher that. So I'm doing a qualitative dissertation. I know all you quantitative people that are doing dissertations, good luck. I'm not good with those numbers. So I think you're great with doing that, but I'm doing that qualitative piece. But in my profession, we use data a lot, and those numbers are important, but we have to look also beyond the numbers. Not a child isn't a number. What their experiences are not a number. They're a person, they're an individual, and they come with unique experiences. We're in the process of doing this. We're examining, evaluating, and infusing resources. It's not enough to just pick one book and read that book and think that is now the Bible for whatever we have to do. We need to do further research. We need to read multiple sources, and we've got to give students choice in some of the things that they're experiencing. I had a student many years ago whose family had 3 children that were all lacrosse phenoms. And we did a project in social studies where kids could pick a topic and do music, like Pamela's music. That was beautiful. To do something like that, or do an artistic rendering of something. So she painted Starry Night freehand, and it still sits on my office door to this day. So when I called her parents and tell them, look, I have a kid that really should be doing artwork, and I think their parents are pushing her in another direction. So the parents met me at the diner one morning, And I talked about the child, and they said, this child's got to go to art school. That parent has to get that kid in art classes. And I turned it around and showed them their child's name on the back of it. You could have knocked them over with a feather. So she now owns an art studio in Manhattan. So you have to sometimes see where they're coming from. And even sometimes as parents, I have 2 children of my own, you don't often see some of the things that they're capable of doing. She was hiding her art easel underneath her bed so her parents wouldn't see it, this kid. So it was amazing that she actually now has become so successful. But I think only in those ways, by doing some of these things, we're going to develop an understanding of other cultures, other people, and develop an appreciation for what they bring to our societies. So it's going to be a long road. This is not going to happen overnight. The system wasn't created overnight, and it's going to take a long time to get us out of this situation. So it's going to be a while, but I'm going to share one last slide. We're preparing students for the future, and everyone here, from the students in the other program and from the School of Education, we dream of a different future. Back when I was a kid, Dick Tracy watches existed, and now we have the Apple Watch. One of my favorite shows was a show called UFO with an electric car. Now we're driving Teslas. I'm really going to date myself how old I am, but when they first landed on the moon in 1969, and now we're looking to go back to the moon with the Orion rocket. So some things sometimes come back again a few decades later. So the future is now for a lot of these kids, and what we're doing now, 50 years from now, is going to look a lot different for a lot of these students. So we just need to prepare them with the skills and abilities to adapt to that changing world. So thank you very much for the opportunity to do this, and I appreciate everyone's support.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kevin, and wish you success in your studies. And thank you for sharing this. This is very helpful. Now, may I open up for conversations, for questions? Anyone, please? Dr. Brett Johnson, please pipe in your questions, and anyone, Mark, Neil.
Can I talk?
Yes,
I'm raising
please.
my hand.
Yeah.
Okay, so hi everyone. I'm going to be the voice that no one's going to like, because I'm going to say things that people don't want to hear. My feedback on this pandemic year and a half, it's not what everyone has said. It's very different. So I'm warning you about that in advance. I have a very nuanced position. I have come to appreciate the classroom without technology ever more. And I say that with tremendous respect for what digital can do. I'm aware that for many people, digital technologies offer a form of access they might not have, but I am fully convinced that universities need to spend more money on classroom experiences and less money on software. I believe, after everything I've seen, that you can't eat a cake online, you can't have good pasta online, and you can't have a great conversation, a truly great conversation online. You can have a good one, but there's something very unique about the nuances that we perceive from each other when we are present and when we have all our devices shut off. There is something that is missing if we don't have that. So I have become very aware of how important the power of that in-person conversation is, and that universities must, to the extent they possibly can, pay much more attention to making that conversation more affordable, to making it more accessible, and to actually, to the extent possible, really pushing technology where it's not needed away. So this is my critical voice on this. I have had amazing conversations on Zoom. I've had wonderful classes on WebEx, but I don't know what it is. So I'm going to say something it's not very scientific. I can't research it. Something feels wrong if I can't feel the students and they can't feel each other. And that sense of feeling is kind of a weird mashup of explicit and tacit knowledge put together. It's something about the way that they have body language feedback, the way their eyes follow other students, and really about the way that they shut off the devices. You know, so I've always, I will end briefly by saying I was always impressed by the fact that there is, in Hindu mythology, there is a series of books called the Upanishads. And I learned that in Sanskrit, the word Upanishad means to sit at the knees of. The implication being that the lesson happens in the presence of a teacher, but in the very physical sense of the word. And I was always impressed that that was a translation of the Upanishads. So I think that there is tremendous wisdom in that kind of togetherness. Those are my 5 cents.
Well, very precious 5 cents, Mark. And I'd like to raise a question to Marin. Marin, where are you?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, you brought in some very interesting points. You kind of summed up many of the points that your previous speakers, our students, have spoken about, particularly Terry and Khadija. But one thing that struck me was there is a difference between instruction versus education. So when you mentioned that, and I agree with you, education, when we use the term, what's the value of education? We are usually looking for a utilitarian response. I'm going to get this job. I'm going to participate in the local economy. And if there is no participating in local economy, then what happens? So my question comes up, the education part of it is developing or preparing for civic engagement. And this is where I begin to see the problem that society is facing. Civic engagement. You mentioned Coursera and all of them can teach you skills and prepare you for jobs, but who is going to prepare us for civic engagement? Who is going to prepare us for societal living? You know, whether it's empathy, whether it's solidarity, whether it's support. Any thoughts, Marian?
Of course. I think there's a lot of value to be had in in-person education, which is why I really emphasize this idea of a hybrid model where you utilize technology, not necessarily to like change the education experience, but to augment it and make it more accessible for different groups of people who might not have access to that experience in any other way. I mean, I personally, like I mentioned, I much prefer the classroom environment, but through everything that's happened, I've been forced to start my career and the big years of my higher education, like my senior year, was spent in this digital environment. And honestly, if people put in the effort, they can have very meaningful connections, conversation, and education. Education is not necessarily just like going through courses online and checking the boxes. Education is experiences and what you learn by connecting and engaging with other people, regardless of the means of it. It's about finding those connections with fellow peers and professors. And I think that's something that holds a lot of people back in this digital system, is they feel uncomfortable. There's this great Douglas Adams quote where he says, like, there's different tiers to technology and how people accept it, that anything in the world when you were born is normal and ordinary and just part of the way the world works. And anything invented between when you're 15 and 35 is new, exciting, and you can maybe get a job in it. And anything invented after you're 35 is just against the natural order of things and should be completely thrown away. But a lot of us don't have a choice in how the education system is going to go. While I think we need to still value that liberal arts education. I mean, I chose St. John's after all for that liberal arts education, that big picture, and that civic engagement mindedness where we have to learn to go beyond the skills and connect the dots to community and to civic engagement, like you mentioned. And
so what you're saying is that what makes me think that if I can push a little bit further is that our online platforms, we are still exploring what are the ways we can kind of create that environment of developing meaningful conversation that Professor Mark was mentioning, a meaningful conversation. I think we're not there as yet. I think we teachers have not been found a way, maybe even the technology itself is not conducive at the moment, but it probably will evolve and will refine itself in the course of time. So it's kind of a whole new space is waiting for us for that, you know, what we call today hybrid. I don't know what we'll call 10 years from now, 5 years from now, something else, you know. So thank you for that, that comment. If I may still hold the fort here, I would like to go back to Khadija. Are you there? Where are you, Khadija? You know, it's something that you touch my pet peeve. And that is one of the things you talked about. You didn't use the word, but I kind of read between the lines. You know, some of the things, yes, you said the institutional education, yes, but also there is something else is happening that kind of got you into, I consider this a mentoring, that things that must be taught cannot be taught in a classroom as part of the curriculum, part of the syllabus, but can be taught in a kind of relationship based. So do you think that somehow that mentoring, even though we may talk about it, but really not happening? And that would be a nice, if we beef up mentoring, that would be a nice way of preparing that other component that we don't get in our curriculum?
Yeah, I think honestly, like everything, you know, mentorship does have like, you know, a lot of benefits, but it also isn't the answer to everything that's, you know, that we need. Like, yes, mentorship allows you to connect with someone that's within your field that you're interested in. And their personal stories might also inspire you. But I think that in the education system specifically, that incorporating mentorship can be something that, you know, just continues to foster the kids' growth, especially because we can feel as if, you know, we're big fish in a small pond, so to speak. And so with, you know, St. John's being so big also, I think having that one-on-one relationship might, you know, be beneficial, even if it's in a group setting, just being able to, you know, provide that.
Thank you very much. Anyone would like to ask a question?
I have some thoughts, actually.
Yes.
So I first and foremost want to thank everyone who joined on this call. Obviously, I know that Basilio had mentioned earlier that I started off as the troublemaker who asked for this conversation to happen. And I like to believe in some form of good trouble is always a good thing. In terms of building conversations, a previous conversation really kind of outlined to me that there was a missing voice in the audience. And I felt that there's students, those who are pursuing their doctorates, I value and appreciate that. And those of you who are finishing your master's degree or had completed it at this point, I appreciate that as well. I think to me, there's a couple of thoughts that came to mind. I think the biggest thing I got back from this conversation is that, you know, the pandemic really highlighted the idea of equity or inequity in many cases. You know, we often can see that there is moments in our society today that I think in many cases we are asking ourselves, what is the future of education? And more importantly, how do we value that type of education? We know that, for example, the idea of going back to the classroom, and I appreciate Mark's point of going back to the classroom, it's critical because we can appreciate that. At the same time, how do we go back to the environments that we're in, understanding that there's clearly other larger societal issues that we have to also face together. You know, in many cases, these issues are not new. They were just highlighted. And more importantly, they were seen. You know, and so I think in that capacity, the future for us kind of comes down to how we approach it in different capacities in the roles that we play. I'm very been fortunate. I see Marin on the call, obviously, like I had her in one of my classes and a few other students as well. And I'm able to appreciate the value and the thought process behind it. But the truth is, it comes from your opinions, it comes from your value, and comes from just speaking up and saying what your needs are. And the reality is that we are not alone in this conversation. In fact, one thing I realized as an administrator, I see things very differently. Sometimes it's about the financials. Often than not, I think it's about the value, more importantly than the dollar amounts. As someone mentioned, students are not numbers, you know, they're individuals, they're people. And so we have to be very cognitive of that process and who they are as well. So I really appreciate these thought processes, what you all brought to the table. And honestly, I'm really happy that Basilio will take on an idea that I throw to him and really run with it, because it shows to me that this is the type of education that we look at, and why it's important that we have this open conversation, you know, in that kind of capacity. So that's really my thoughts on this as well.
Oh, thanks, James. Thank you. Thank you so much. I would like to ask a question to Pamela. She kind of provoked me to think something which has been at the back of my mind, but suddenly brings to my forefront here is, who goes into teaching? Who wants to become a teacher? What kind of person? How do they see it? Do they see it as a job, or do they see it as a calling?
I think that's an excellent question. I think the evidence is clear based on what we're looking at in our system today. And I'm not going to, of course, trash teachers, because at my heart, I'm one of them. But I think it has to be a calling. It has to be a deep love for what you're doing, to invest, to take your values and character and all of that love and to put it into inspiring the next generation. I remember when I was getting my master's degree, I was in school with a woman that had been working at the telephone company for some years. And she's like, well, wanted to try something different. So I'm going to go into teaching. And I was just listening. I was like, that's interesting. Because teaching is a rough job if you're going to do it properly. And it pulls on every part of your life. And you have to be committed and called to it. That's my perspective. I don't think it's just something that you do. I can't be successful at other things, so let me teach. No, it has to be something deep within.
Thank you so much. Thank you for elaborating on that. Yeah.
Can I respond to that as well?
Yes,
I agree
please.
Completely with Pamela. In the interview process I've been running for the past 20 years as an administrator in a K through 12 districts, one of the first questions I ask candidates is, do you like working with kids? It sounds like such a basic question. There's so many people that just don't like being around children, and they want to become teachers, and they don't realize that every day you're going to be working around children, and you better have some appreciation, understanding. And I agree with Dr. Mark as well. There's nothing that takes the place of a great teacher in front of a group of students, and that personal touch is there. We were very lucky in my district. 85% of the students were in. We were one of only 3 school districts on Long Island that were able to do that because of our declining enrollment. And it made a difference in a lot of the kids' lives. We are doing so much social emotional counseling right now of students that are home, that are disconnected from their friends and the school. It's been a horrible year for a lot of children. And the more we can do to connect them with us, we're hoping that COVID's not going away. My wife and daughter are both in the healthcare profession. They lost a 13-year-old girl just yesterday in their hospital. So if people think COVID's gone away, it hasn't gone away. We have to be very cautious and very careful. Vaccines are going to be great, but we need to still be cautious of what we're doing, especially with the little ones who aren't going to have the ability to be vaccinated just yet. So it is truly a calling, and it takes a very special person to work with children. And I think, St. John's has done a wonderful job at vetting candidates in these programs and working with people to help them become the future educators in our system.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Thank you. Anyone would like to say a few words before we still have about 10 minutes more. We can carry on. Dr. Brett Johnson, I'd like to hear your voice. Unmute.
You're on mute.
First of all, I would like to say I'm so sorry that I missed all of the presentations. I had another meeting. I just heard the presentations from those that were in the School of Ed. And by the way, you did an excellent job. And I also heard Megan, is that her name? Megan? What a powerful presentation. But I missed all of the others, and I'm so sorry. But I thought, what I did hear was great. And I'm so glad, Basilio, that you listened to Kevin James, who told you to put this together, because it was an opportunity for everyone to come and share their different perspectives on what the future of education may look like. Mark, I really appreciate your words very, very much. I feel just like you. And I love the classroom myself. But then I have to say to myself, things are things are going to be different. And Yvonne, I say to myself, you have to just adjust and you have to go with the flow. I think that technology is going to take just a play a big part in our education somehow. And like others have said on the call, how can we, I think we have to begin to ponder as educators and leaders, how can we give students that feel of an in-class experience, but online? That's something I'm thinking about, Mark. I don't have the answer myself, but I think that things are not going to be the same as usual. It's not going to be business as usual anymore as we move ahead. Just some thoughts. And again, thank you very much for coming out. Basilio, look what you did. You got everyone out tonight and it's like almost 9 o'clock and no one wants to leave. Thank you so much for coordinating this webinar. I loved very much what I heard. Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you. Let me call on some of my colleagues. Kafu, Claren, you always have something buzzing in your head. Please, pipe in. I like to put on the spot.
Really got me there, Professor. So, I mean, what we were kind of concluding with as far as teaching, and it was, what is your name? With Dr. Scanlon, you know, about just like the importance of teaching and everything like that. And it's just kind of like what we've all already mentioned before, but it's like if the jobs, if our careers and if our jobs didn't mandate a 4-year degree, would we still be doing this? And, you know, would we continue to still educate ourselves after getting out of high school? And, you know, those, I guess they're more so just questions that I wish could go into further discussion. I really honestly feel like I could keep talking about this for hours and hours with all of you, but I know that we're crunched for time. I honestly, I have no real statements. I just have questions. Like, I just want to keep asking questions.
Yes, no, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Asking questions is a good thing.
One thing,
yeah. Claren, you would like to, now that your truck is gone, passed by, the fire truck.
I will touch upon this, and I think, I'm sure Coffee will come back because I want you to expand upon this because you touched upon it briefly, and I wanted to snag that. I think one of the most important moments in my educational journey is I had a dean mention to me how one thing that he's really disappointed in is how my generation is so focused on coming to school and making sure we're going to make as much money as possible. We're going to milk this cow with the degree that we're getting. So how, and people, so much so that people will say, oh my gosh, I went into school for journalism, but I'm not going to get enough milk out of that cow. So I need to switch my degree because someone told me I'm going to make more money over here. And at first I was like, oh, he's being so short-sighted. People are just trying to think ahead into their future. But the more that I've pursued even higher education within getting my master's, is I found when I let go of the reasoning behind my education, when I went into international communications, it was because I had really felt this calling toward diplomacy. And I had some really unique and really cool opportunities that led me to that. So I said, okay, great, let's kind of go actually with what I'm passionate about. And when I let go of, fingers crossed, I hope I make enough money to, enough money to justify my education became justified in how much I grew as a person. And as a, honestly, like, I feel like the people I've met and the way that I've been able to open myself up to other global perspectives and international students I've met and hearing their stories and where they come from has made me a better person. And I really want young people. And so that I won't say that dean, I don't think he was short-sighted or being old-fashioned. I think that there's merit to the sentiment of what he was saying. And it's something that I pass along when I meet young people who are considering, this is one thing I get when I go into schools. Kids will say to me, well, I mean, I don't know what I want to do, but I know you can make really good money in finance. So I think I'm going to try and go into finance. And the question is like, you can make money doing lots of different things in your lifetime, but you don't take it with you when you die. So yes, of course, ensure that the education that you're getting, you're going to be able to pay off your loans and do something realistic with your talents, of course. Got it. I think we can all agree to that in this room, that that's important to a certain extent. But I do think we need to encourage our youth. And I am so grateful that someone encouraged me early on in my collegiate career to really get in touch with growing yourself as an individual and as a scholar first, and then using those skills and those talents, you know, to better your life. I would like us to get away from consistently monetizing the things that we love and that we're good at. It's a little, it cheapens it in so many ways. And so I want to stop doing that. And I want to encourage more young people to stop doing that.
If I could just jump in for a second, Taryn, I think that's wonderful, because for a very long time, and I'm like 32 now, so I've been in school at St. John's for some time now. I work here, and I realize now, more importantly, it wasn't that I was searching for the job that made the most money, because I know that I could have left here a very long time ago and probably made a lot more money. But what I found was that there was a love and passion for it. And so it kind of goes back to a couple of what many of you have said before. You know, whenever you look, there's no linear path to success, but I question the notion of how do we want to define success? How do we want to sit back and say, what is success for us? And if it is monetary, that is totally fine. But the reality is that when I found success is when I found that I love what I do. And not only do I love what I do, I'm good at what I do. And I believe in that. And so whenever I think of people who say that, I love when someone says, I love what I do, I'm great at it, I feel good when I get up in the morning, and I feel great when I go home. That is where I feel like the most value is for someone to say that. It is something that drives me every day, because trust me, working here at the university isn't always the greatest for me, you know, and like any place you go to, but I believe in what we do. And I know that this is where the place that's going to make me the best version of Kevin that I can be. So I appreciate
Thanks, Kevin. Thank you very much. James Whitley, share with us your thoughts.
No, of course. One of the most common things I've been thinking about recently, especially during the pandemic, is just, and it kind of goes, since we're talking about monetary values, it's just how important teachers and educators are, not only in like higher education, but education in general. Just yesterday, I got dinner with friends, and one of them is a teacher, and she was telling me about her experience working at a private school here in Queens, and just the transition that they've all had to make, being online, being in the classroom, going back and forth. And it kind of just reiterates the question on why this isn't something that is not necessarily a more desirable job, but a job that isn't appreciated the way I think it should be. I don't necessarily have any teachers in my family except for my brother-in-law, and he works at a private school in Jersey, and he doesn't complain about the pay because he loves doing it. And I think it's very, very, very admirable, and I encourage people to go into the field. But I feel like the question should be being raised, especially during this pandemic, is why are these people who are necessary to the growth of the next generation being paid more, and why is it not a job that more people are striving to move into because they can get paid to do more? So it's definitely something that I think about all the time. I was growing up, I didn't have 11 kids in my family, but my dad was one of 10, and he always taught me growing up the power of getting things done and working together in teamwork. His parents passed away when he was young, and essentially his brothers and sisters raised him together. So one of the key things that I learned growing up was to have that connection with my brother and sister, and kind of grow from there. And as they have all gone on to do amazing things that they're very proud of, I'll never forget the day that my sister was like, I love teaching and I want to be a teacher. Long story short, she didn't even become a teacher, but it was something that she had the desire and she wanted to do. And she just never got into it. But it's something that it amazes me that people don't want to move into more. And beyond that, why it's not more appreciated, and especially during this pandemic, as we praise our healthcare workers for the work they've done, which is very much deserving. I think we almost turn a blind eye to how much appreciation should be given to teachers who are continuing to work throughout this.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Professor Feinstein, I see you there.
So I'm hopeful, and I find the conversation to be, it's one or the other. Is there's technology is moving us to one place, or the conversation, you know, there's nothing like the classroom experience. I think that we are in a period of invention. I live in Manhattan, and I see all these restaurants opening up on the street, and I see, you know, even as the city has slowed down, that there's going to be tremendous change. People are liking the outside environment. So yes, restaurants are going to have a different iteration. I think the city is going to have a different iteration because of this. And I see that as what's going to happen, as an analogy as to what's going to happen in education. Mm-hmm. Technology will be used. We will utilize technology. We will discover new ways to bring technology to make the learning experience an experience. There is nothing like the classroom experience. I agree with you 100%, Mark. But there is also, but we haven't figured out exactly what technology is going to do. I just know that technology is not going to be this. It's not going to be us having this conversation here. That's fine and dandy and easy enough to do. Technology, somebody has to explore what are the other possibilities. Where can it go, and what will that new thing be? We don't know what that new thing will be. Exactly. The new thing will come the more and more we use it, and it'll be incremental in change. Yeah. So we will, you know, it's like all good ideas that you don't have that big aha moment, you build onto it and build onto it and build onto it. So someone will explore something, try something new, and then somebody else will say, well, what if we do it this way? And what if we do it this way? And 10 years from now, technology will be part of the ecosystem of education, but not in the way we've been forced to do it over this past year and a half because of the pandemic.
Thank you so much, Neil. I'll give the last word to one of our students, Cheryl Nicholson. Cheryl?
Yeah, hi. I wasn't expecting to speak, but I will just say I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation tonight, and thank you all for presenting and sort of sharing our ideas. And I agree with a lot of you, right? Like, I think that, you know, the classroom is a wonderful place, is a wonderful time for everyone to kind of get together and talk and share thoughts and ideas. But I do think that technology is going to play a huge role in how we move forward in education. And so, like, you know, Professor Feinstein was saying, it's just a matter of how are we going to, you know, what's going to be the next step? How are we going to, you know, integrate the two? And I think there's just a lot of unknowns. And like Claren was saying, lots of questions. We have a lot of questions. This has only been a year and a half of us learning how to operate differently. And I think it's just going to take a lot more time, and it's going to take some people with some really big brains, a lot of us in this Zoom call today, to figure out, you know, how we can move forward and what's the best way that sort of works for everybody. And like, you know, like it was mentioned earlier, equity is key. And I don't want to talk too long, but I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation today. So thank you for having me on, and thank you for holding this. So Dean James, good idea. And Professor Montero, excellent job coordinating this and getting this together. So thank you.
Well, all good things have to come to an end. Tomorrow afternoon at 1 o'clock, Dr. Pat Johnson and myself will be doing something else, right? So we'll be talking about immigration education. Imagine that. So come and join us if you feel like, at 1 o'clock. And so I really want to take this moment to, first of all, congratulate our students who are graduating with their degrees in international communication and also integrated advertising communication. And want to remind them that we have now a newly approved PhD in multi-sector communication. So we'll already having students coming in September. And so we'll have a first cohort starting in September. At the moment, I have about 5 students within a few weeks of the information who have already applied. And so think about that. And, you know, let us keep this conversation going, because this is a very important conversation. This is not just kind of a thing. This is something we have to think, because the future of the society, the future of democracy, the future of how we live our lives, how we organize our economy, how we organize our social life, our political life, all depends on what kind of building blocks we build among ourselves when we are growing up. The sense of solidarity, the sense of empathy, the civic engagement, these virtues are cultivated in a collective. So where we're going to find this collective? So far we found the classroom. Now are we going to find a new space, what we call, Luciano Floridi would say, infosphere, infosphere, that's where we're going to move. So anyway, so I want to thank everyone, all of us who are graduating, and congratulations. And thank you for joining us and keeping this conversation. I've recorded this conversation. I hope I know how to save it. I have to call on James, Kevin James.
You saved it to the cloud, so we're okay.
so I'm so dumb when it comes to technology. So thank you so much, and have a wonderful evening. And special thanks to Kevin Scanlon, to Gustavo Lour, and to Pamela. Delightful conversation, and thank you, everyone. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
See you tomorrow, Dr. Brett Johnson.
I will see you tomorrow.
Yep. Megan Marin, wonderful. Taryn, terrific.
I have to go on your paper now.
Yeah, terrific. Khadija, thank you so much. James, Sam, all of you, thank you so much. Taryn, good luck tomorrow with your New York. What are you doing, New York?
Oh, Miss New York.
Miss New York.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, keep us posted, okay?
Thank you so much. Have a great night.
Okay. Very good, bye-bye.